It's 4 o'clock. Good afternoon, my lords. Before the start of proceedings on the Consumer Insurance Disclosures and Representations Bill, it may be helpful if I say a word about the procedure which we will follow today. In nearly all respects, our proceedings will be identical to those in a Grand Committee. Any member of the House may attend and speak. As we are in committee, members may speak more than once to each amendment or motion. The main difference from Grand Committee procedure is that the committee may vote on amendments or on the questions that clauses stand part of the bill. If, when I collect the voices, it is clear that there is no agreement, I will announce that a division will be held. Only the named members of the Special Public Bill Committee are entitled to vote in the division. If all the members are present, we will proceed to the division immediately. If, however, members are absent, which I know they are, there will be a pause of 8 minutes to allow members time to reach the Moses room, after which the doors will be locked. Members should note that divisions will be notified in the rolling text on the annunciators. The procedure for divisions will be that the clerk will read out the names in alphabetical order. Members should reply content, not content, or abstain. I will then announce the results of the division and we will proceed with the next amendment or motion. So, my lords, we now start. The question is that the title of the bill be postponed. As Mary that pen will say content. Contrary not content, the contents have it. The question is that clause 1 stand part of the bill. As Mary that pen will say content. Contrary not content, the contents have it. In clause 2, amendment 1, Lord Hodgson of Astley, Abbotts.
The background to Amendment 1 and 1A are vaguely similar, so if I may, I'll take a moment to explain this, and I can be briefer on the second amendment. But before doing so, I should, since we're starting the next stage of the proceedings, this will probably declare an interest, that I am chairman of a company which is called an IFA network firm, that is to say, provides services, compliance services to independent financial advisors. And of course, in this, we do provide insurance to individuals, to consumers, which would fall within the purview of this bill. Insurance for people's lives, insurance for people's homes as part of their mortgage requirements and so on. And it has a particular resonance when we come to Amendment 8, and I may refer to it again then. So my first amendment is to add a further clause, subclause to clause 2. And clause 2 is headed Disclosure and Representations before Contract and Variation. And what I'm seeking to do here is to make a further requirement about disclosure, and which will provide additional information to the consumer. Now, as I understand it, the background to this bill is in non-legal terms, is to achieve greater equality of arms between what are predominantly large, well-resourced and at times bureaucratic companies and the individual man in the street or woman in the street who is taking out insurance. And this is to be achieved by changing the legal background in the sense that the Marine Insurance Act of 1906 confusingly applies to not just marine insurance but to all forms of insurance, including consumer insurance, and by some operational background changes, some which are statutory through the Financial Services Authority, and under that, perhaps one might say quasi-statutory, the Financial Ombudsman and the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, and very importantly, partly self-regulatory through the use of industry codes. And these threads provide a sort of tangled mixture of redress as far as the consumer is concerned. Now, if we were debating, my lords, I think a conventional bill, we would be asking the Minister to bring forward some draft regulations, some statutory instruments, so the committee could get some idea of what the practical implications of the architecture, the structure of the bill, which we were being asked to approve. In essence here, my lords, I think I argue that the industry codes are the detailed regulations are equivalent to the statutory instruments. But of course the bill as drafted does not even mention the existence of the possibility of codes. Now, I have raised this before, and Mr. David Hodgson and his team have been extremely courteous. They've given me a lot of time. I've been to see them, and nothing that I am going to say is in any way would I wish to reflect on the for the time he's given me and the courtesy he's shown me. But, my Lords, as we look through the transcript of the evidence sessions, we do find ourselves flirting with the importance of these codes. If we look at page 6 of the evidence session of Tuesday, the 11th of October, Mr. Herzl says the bill has been drafted to provide high-level overarching principles. It seeks to set a framework, deal with a problem, but does not seek to lay down guidance. Guidance should come about the insurance industry. And on page 8 he says it's reflected in the ABI code on group life, critical illness and income protection. And then he also quotes Lord Justice Ricks speaking to Insurance Law Conference in 2007 this is Lord Justice Ricks' words, in a country that prides itself on the adherence to the rule of law, the opening up of a gap between the laws applied in the courts and self-regulation that applies a matter of discretion, the relations between the insurance industry and its consumers might be said to be an unsatisfactory state of affairs. And that's the end of the quote. Now, it seems to me that actually what we're doing here is we're actually opening up that gap because we are proposing to have these overarching principles with no reference to the underlying codes that are going to provide much of the day-to-day guidance and much of the day-to-day practical implications of this. Now, this is clearly not an open and shut case, I understand that. Clearly, the ABI has said several times, and again in a letter sent out today, it doesn't want to be bound by this. But I should point out that my amendment doesn't bind anybody to anything. It just says it is the duty of the insurer to make clear whether they comply with industry codes of practice. It doesn't say they have to comply with them. It merely has to say, let the consumer know whether they do or do not. And that would enable the insurer to say, look, I see this, what does this mean? What are the codes? What protection do they provide me? How further do I have to do in order to be protected by them? Now, the Minister will say, and I'm sure, because he'll have had a copy of this letter, I'm sure as well, that we had a real savaging from Mr. David Sanders, the principal trading standards officer from the Vale of Glamorgan, and rowing in behind him to give me an equal bigger beating as Peter Tilsley. And they have pointed out, or they say, that this will add uncertainty to the law. That's the essence of their case. But that may be, but I submit to the committee, if I may, my Lords, that the risk, without some cross-referencing, that the statute law, which we're now setting out now, which is very broad in principle, becomes out of date. It becomes confusing. It becomes, indeed, as the Marine Insurance Act has become, left behind by events. And actually the codes will become more and more important. So my conclusion is that, without in any way binding anybody, we should make reference to the codes in the bill, and we should therefore be able to give the consumer a piece of information on which he may or may not choose to use to follow up. And therefore, I beg to move.
I venture to again insert the words printed on the Marshall list.
Do I need the Chairman's permission? I can't remember on these occasions. Sorry. No. The mic wasn't very good for the last speaker, so if anybody can't hear me, it sort of whistles and so on.
Barry, if you could carry on, we'll try and sort this out with the sound engineer.
Well, I wanted to oppose the amendment put forward by Lord Hodgson for this reason. During the long period when consumers, as it were, knew and their organisations understood that the law was very unsatisfactory, then reliance on industry codes, especially that of the ABI, was of course extremely useful because many disputes were settled informally, and they were settled informally on the basis of codes of practice. And if they went to the Ombudsman, they were settled on the basis of best practice, which included reference to the ABI codes. But of course now, when the bill is passed, that is, we are in a completely different situation in which the consumer will have the benefit of law, whereby no longer is he required by the old duty of uberrimai fidei, the duty of disclosure, and he's got the benefit of a range of various remedies if there is a so-called qualifying misrepresentation. And the world of the consumer in insurance is much improved if this bill passes. But would the bill benefit by having just a reference, as Lord Hodgson suggests, to industry codes of practice? Well, it is not surprising that the ABI refer to this as nebulous and undefined. There is no definition of industry codes of practice, nor does Lord Hodgson propose one. A reference to industry codes of practice is nebulous because where there are some in existence at the moment, others might emerge, and who knows which one is to be thought appropriate and activated by this amendment if it were passed into the bill. My own view, as I expressed somewhat earlier in the earlier stage of this bill, my own view is that it would not be helpful to have this amendment. It would damage the clarity of the law as laid down in the bill as it stands. And of course, industry codes of practice are what the phrase implies. They are industry codes of practice. They are proposed by the industry, and if you like, imposed by the industry. And just because they have been very good to the consumer over the years in the way I've described, that doesn't mean that would always be so. And the bill, after it becomes an act, is surely intended to last for some considerable time. It would be terrible if we had to come back to it. And because of some reference to industry codes of practice, we had to amend the bill so that it didn't apply to this or that code of practice. So, my Lords, I feel I'm not inclined to support this amendment.
Might I very briefly express my complete agreement with the Noble Lord Borry. The bill was based on the codes, as has been pointed out by the Noble Lord, but it was also intended to replace the codes. And if we are to reintroduce the codes in this way, it seems to me that we will be reintroducing uncertainty, which was the whole object of this bill to eliminate. And just to take one example of that, in the ABA letter, which we've just had, there are apparently, it's entirely new to me, there are apparently 70 codes to which there might be reference. And clearly one would have to identify which codes, and then of course would have to, Lords, it won't work.
Well, just to show what a bipartisan committee this is, I'm going to be more sympathetic to Lord Hodgson. The problem that we face is that Mr. Herzl has told us that the codes were fundamental to the way that the bill was drawn up. I quote from his evidence: "Our view was that in trying to lay down detailed guidance covering every eventuality, particularly those that might relate to scientific and information technology matters, these will quickly become out of date and the bill would become ossified. So we tried to set out principles rather than detailed practices, on the reasonable assumption that detailed rules, for example about inappropriate questions, should either come via guidance in the insurance industry, from target legislation such as the Equality Act, or as appropriate from the FSA." So industry guidance, we have been told in evidence, was actually a component in the design of the bill. So the fact that industry guidance would be there. So I'm very sympathetic to the intention of the Noble Lord Hodgson's amendment, particularly given that I know that Baroness Kramer, who cannot be here this afternoon, was very concerned about this, as we can see in the evidence proceedings. And we had extensive discussion about the role that codes played and the Ombudsman's activities played in the development of fair practice within the insurance industry. And I myself was puzzling over various ways in which we might be able to incorporate some reference to the codes of practice without, of course, turning codes of practice into quasi-legislation, but retaining the flexibility which Mr. Herzl claims was fundamental background to the way in which the bill was drafted. And so I think we should be more sympathetic to the intentions of of the noble Lord Hodgson's amendments, even if we are not happy with the precise formulation.
My Lords, I take the view to begin with that Amendment 1A is not appropriate to these proceedings. Amendment 1 seems to me to be one which would not, I think, be seriously damaging to the bill, but my own view is that this is not, in fact, really necessary here, though I should, at the request of my noble friend, Lady Cromer, who is unable here today, to say that she did ask me to pass on to this committee that her view that it should involve that the industry codes of practice should be included. As I said, I mean, my view is a definite no to 1A, and one that I'm not prepared to go forward in support of Amendment 1.
My Lords, first of all, just to be clear, I think Amendment 1 is not grouped with Amendment 1A, so I'll, if that's correct, I'll just address my remarks for the moment to Amendment 1, and then I'm sure we'll move on to 1A afterwards. I also am sympathetic to the intentions behind this amendment from my noble friend Lord Hodgson of Astley Abbotts, because it is clear that industry codes have an important role to play. They are taken account of amongst other places in FOS determinations, but they do occupy a rather anomalous position, which is both a strength and a weakness. The fact that they aren't, as far as I'm aware, directly linked into any financial services legislation that I've been able to turn up, that they are not officially endorsed by the FSA, but are seen by the FSA when they're worked up, means that they are in an unusual position. But actually, this is also a strength, because it does mean that they can be adapted flexibly over time, and we shouldn't underestimate the effect of their being endorsed by such a powerful body as the ABI. Now, to step back a moment, I mean, first of all, incidentally, I buy some of the arguments in the ABI's recent letter on this point, but I certainly don't buy into all the arguments that they make. But I think it's worth stressing that the strength of the ABI opposition to this is relevant to the way that we're handling this bill, because, of course, we are going through the special procedure applicable to Law Commission bills. This means that the bill has to remain non-controversial. This is a very important point that we should discuss, but I just stress as a general point as we go through the bill that we have to be cognizant of the fact that if we move into what the usual channels might deem to be controversial territory, we put the passage of the bill at risk under this procedure, and then I don't know what happens, but the bill would have to come back in some other form. So I think that every amendment we're discussing this afternoon raises an important topic. I am not going to resist every single one, I can assure this committee, but I just make that general point that we need to be careful about the nature of this bill. To the specifics of this amendment, I think what we haven't previously discussed in this committee is that the Law Commission did give very careful consideration to a reference to industry codes in the bill and did specifically consult on this. And this is discussed in paragraphs 1029 to 1043 of their 2009 report, and they actually suggested a draft clause which read, and I quote, "The insurer may not take advantage of any remedy provided for under this schedule if or to the extent that it would be unreasonable to do so according to written guidance generally recognised by insurers providing the type of insurance in question," unquote. So there was a consultation very directly to this point, and detailed consideration was given by the Law Commission, and it was their recommendation following the consultation that it was not included in the bill. They were concerned that the clause would discourage the industry from agreeing codes, something which would also be a consequence of any amendments along the lines of the one suggested. And I don't want to labour the point about self-regulation and undermining its nature, or the points, the very practical points made by the noble Lord Murray about how the definition would be, how it would link to which particular codes out of the many the ABI have. I certainly will look as a practical matter at whether it would be possible for the codes themselves to reference the fact that an insured party ought to be aware of the existence of the codes. That would at least, to some way, close the loop, but I don't know whether that is possible or practical. I certainly don't buy into the argument that having another line somewhere in all the detail that goes along with, no doubt, we are FSA regulated and all that. I don't see why it would be burdensome necessarily to have a confirmation somewhere in online or in the written material that referred back to the industry code. So I don't know whether anything will be possible, but I say to my noble friend and to the committee that I will continue to look at non-legislative ways of handling what is a substantive point. Now, there is, though, one important point to be made in respect of the specific reason, I think, which my noble friend Lady Kramer initially brought this up, which is in relation to genetic testing. And I think it is important and relevant here to explain to the committee what else there is in place which helps consumers in this specific area. It's this, which is that there is a concordat and a moratorium on genetics and insurance in place between the government and the insurance industry, and it is working well and is perhaps an exemplar of how self-regulation can work in an area such as this. It's something that was actually explicitly recognised by your Lordship's House in their 2009 inquiry report on genomic medicine, and the government believes that compliance with this code is very important. We are working to strengthen how it is enforced, and a new form of the agreement is being developed, which will see the ABI commit to publish a list of firms that have confirmed compliance on its website, and to provide annual reports to government on the number of complaints received about the operation of the concordat and moratorium. So on the very specific point, which I think was, I don't know if it was behind my noble friend specifically bringing forward this amendment, but I know in relation to my noble friend Lady Kramer's concerns, there is a specific backstop to which government and the industry are party, and which we will continue to operate. And of course, as this law develops over the next decades, we have the ability to backstop the bill or the law as it may become in this way. And the last point I should make is that during consultation on this on this bill which did support the inclusion of a provision on codes, but they were concerned about how the clause was to be drafted so as to ensure that only codes which benefited the consumer at the time of entry into the contract were included. And I would point out again, it comes very much to the point that the Noble Lord Borry was making, that a wholesale reference to industry codes would not be able to ensure that only elements that were in favour of consumers should be included. So I would, on the basis of what I have said, ask my noble friend to withdraw his amendment.
Well, I'm grateful to my noble friend and all other noble lords who have participated in this debate. Could I just respond to the points, first of all, made by the noble Lord Borry? I agree the bill improves the situation. I'm just trying to make the situation still better with this amendment. This was not. I think he indicated that I was actually making the bill worse. I'm not trying to make the bill better. And he made the point about it being from the industry, and I understand that. The industry are providing the insurance, and I'm trying to get into the bill something that tells the consumer, this is an industry code. These are the people from whom you are getting your insurance. You need to find out about what it implies and what it requires. So that I think that is important. I don't mind the fact that it may be one-sided. I mean, so long as the person knows whence it comes. And then, if I may say to the noble Lord Lloyd of Berwick, he said this: we are replacing the codes. Well, that isn't what the evidence said, because Mr. Hertzl said the bill has been drafted to provide high-level overarching principles. It sets out a framework to deal with the problems. It does not seek to lay down guidance, so that the consumer is going to be forced back to the codes for his protection in the future. This is the 5 principles, but we don't get any further into the detail, and the detail, of course, is where it affects individuals. I'm grateful to the noble Lord Equal. I am not in any way wedded to the wording I used. This was to try and get the issue on the table. I did not suspect that I managed to draft this in a parliamentary way. And as far as my noble friend the Minister is concerned, I am grateful for his reassurance that he will do what he can to build awareness of codes along the lines of the Concord Act on genetic testing. I think it's very important we should try and do that. And I accept entirely his argument that more clauses and more paper is unlikely to benefit the consumer and may well confuse him more. I absolutely refute the idea that doing this will discourage the industry from agreeing new codes. I think that's just an attempt to try and avoid having to accept this, because they want actually they'd produce new codes whether this was in here or not. And also I do think that he referred to the uncontroversial nature of our proceedings. Well, I think the uncontroversial is whether it is drawn on political lines. That's what the problem with these Law Commission bills. Not that we disagree about them. I mean, the noble Lord Law Equal and I are on different sides of the political spectrum. It's uncontroversial in terms of politics. It's not uncontroversial in terms of impact and effect. But that having been said, I sense the committee would not support this if pushed to test the opinion of this committee, so I beg leave to withdraw.
Mr. It's a pleasure this amendment be withdrawn. Amendment is by leave withdrawn. Amendment